So I wanted to try and make this video before the Sorceress patch comes out that's gonna buff the Sorceress back up. Even though most of what I'm about to say might go out the window, I wanted to try and like get it on record just so it was established before the buff comes out why Sorceress was at the bottom of the pack. Now, the easiest thing I can explain is that one of the main reasons why Sorceress is at the bottom of the pack is if you compare it to all the other classes in the game, there's more builds that are available. So if I don't play Rogue, Rogue is broken. Rogue, without even going into their details too much, you have a few options available to you. First off, you have Dagger build, you have Bow build, you have Imbuement build, you have the Trap build. Then that's not even getting into the difference between combo points and momentum and some of the other little shit going on there. That's not breaking down individual skills. You look at Barbarian. Barbarian has Bludgeon, which most people call Hammer of the Ancients, but there's more to it than that. There's Bludgeon build, there's Bleed build, there's Whirlwind build, there's Berserking build, there's Brawling build, there's the Basic Bitch build, there's the, what's the one I'm thinking of? Double Swing build. Just off the bat, that's what I have, right? You go to Necromancer. Necromancer's first mechanic is that... I want to play. No, you don't. You never want to play. Necromancer has... First off, Necromancer has the choice between Summon, Solo, and Solo with a Golem, okay? Not even breaking down the skills, which you have Blood, you have Bone, which Bone can split into two with Bone Spirit or Bone Spear. You have Blight, which can split into two if you go for the Sever instead. There's that. Druid is just a giant clusterfuck of different build options. Druid has Pure Werebear, Pure Werewolf, Hybrid Shapeshift, Pure Elemental Earth, Pure Elemental Storm, Hybrid Elemental. The Storm Werewolf build, the Earth Werebear build, the Clusterfuck that runs everything build, the Companion build, the Support build. Okay. Now you go to Support, or Support Sorceress. There. Now you go to Sorceress, right? I'm gonna hop on this Sorceress to explain. Sorceress has 4 builds. 4. That's it. 4. You have Fire, Ice, Lightning, Battle Mage, which is kind of a hybrid. Okay. So, when you have Sorceress, it's kind of a weird pendulum that you're going to swing between. Because there's very good things that Sorceress has that other classes don't have. That's completely offset by the rest of it. Now, Sorceress, unlike most classes in the game, has very good defensive skills. Okay? If you look at Sorceress's 4 defensive skills that they have arguably 4 of the best defensive skills in the game. Okay? I personally don't like Teleport. A lot of people do. Teleport works interestingly. Short cooldown, makes you unstoppable, does damage. You get damage reduction off of it. I just don't like how the teleport functionality works on it. It doesn't feel that smooth to me. Every other class in the game would love to have this skill. Ice Armor. Barrier. Absorbs damage for 6 seconds. While active, damage you deal is added to the barrier. You can regenerate mana faster while Ice Armor is up. This is kind of a lesser skill. Not every class wants a barrier, so to speak, but having a barrier that you can add damage to, that regenerates main source faster. Very important. Most classes would like to have this. Frost Nova. Longer cooldown, instant freeze around you. Chance to reduce its cooldown, can make enemies vulnerable, can generate resource. Builds love crowd control. Most characters would love to have Frost Nova in their build. Flame Shield, in my opinion, is literally the single best defensive skill in the game. Cooldown, unstoppable, complete damage immunity, boost in movement speed, and the shittier of the 2 effects is mana cost reduction. The better one is heal 50% of your missing life. Every single class in the game would love to have this. Most classes generally have a crutch defensive skill, except Necromancer, who literally has 1 defensive skill. Most classes have that crutch defensive skill that's kind of auto-slotted in there for crowd control and immunity, which is part of the problem that defensive skills as a whole have, is there's no diversity. All Barbarians are running Rallying Cry. All Druids are running Earthen Bulwark. All Sorceresses are running Flame Shield. All Necromancers are running Blood Mist, and all Rogues are running Shadow Step. And if you're not, more power to you, good job. I see a lot of people that don't run Flame Shield, but when they die, I laugh at them, because they're not running the right skill. If you had Flame Shield, you could cancel it out, right? So, if their defensive skills are good, why is Sorceress at the bottom of the barrel? Well, let's talk about some problems that Sorceress has. First off, Sorceress is the only class in the game that doesn't have basic skills that generate resource. Yes, Barbarian has to generate their own resource. Now it goes down over time, but they have ways to generate resource reliably. But when that fails, basic attack just goes swing swing. Okay? Necromancer passively regenerates their mana very slowly, but they generate it manually with their basic attack. They have other ways to generate mana, but when all else fails, you go swing swing. Druid, same thing, generates mana. Okay? Or, well, they have spirit, but everything's going to be mana just for the sake of ease. Generate spirit, spend spirit. They have other ways to get spirit. Guess what? All else fails, go swing swing. Rogue does passively regenerate their resource, but they have much better ways of getting it back than Sorceress does. So, what's the problem? Sorceress basic skills have no use. Okay? I'm dead ass. Every other class that I did a video on this and talked about, Barbarian, Druid, Necromancer, their basic skills were good because their basic skills gave you value outside of, I am a basic skill, I generate damage, I generate resource. So because of that, these skills right here you don't necessarily want to build into. Now, if you want to look at the skills and see what they do, Lightning gets 2 basic skills, which 100% just boil down to close range or long range. So they want a brawling Sorceress build. You run Arc Lash. It does the most damage out of the basics. It stuns every 10 hits. Decent skill. The problem is it's incredibly close range, which means you have to brawl. That's not something that a fragile class like Sorceress does. And if you end up doing that, you're now running 2 defensive skills to compensate. You need Flame Shield and Ice Armor in order to give yourself extra survivability. Or maybe you run Frost Nova for the CC. Most of the time you're running some combination of Flame Shield, Teleport, and Ice Armor. So, because you're running this basic skill, you're now losing a minimum of 2 other slots, meaning you only have 3 slots left for an ultimate and 2 damaging skills. Just because you took Arc Lash. If you take Spark, however, you're dealing much less damage. You're not getting a secondary effect. The main thing that you can get off of Spark is you can either get crit, bouncing, or crackling energy. If you don't build crackling energy, this is useless. So you take the crit because lightning likes to crit. And the bouncing energy is kind of just there, right? The skill's not bad if you level into it like I did. If you level into it and you're building around crits, it's particularly good. The problem is that this is your only ranged ability if you're picking lightning. Now, if you're playing fire, you run Firebolt. The reason why is because it applies burning damage, which you need for your skills. You can get the Pierce, which is nice, but it does no damage because it's all in the burning damage. Does great burning damage, but burning damage sucks. There's generating mana when you hit a burning enemy, which in theory makes fire have very great mana recovery and mana synergy. Because it's just, I'm just spamming out my basic attack. 2 mana per hit, though, is terrible. And I don't know if it's bugged, but the penetrate doesn't work with this. Meaning, in order for me to get enough mana to cast 1 fireball, I have to hit 15 enemies with this skill just to get a free fireball, which is the cheapest of the fire damage skills. So this is shit. Fire also has this inherent problem that they want crits. Okay? Lightning wants crit and fire want crit. Here's the difference. Lightning crits have random stun chance. Fire crits increase burning damage. Burning damage and damage over time effects do not apply crit. So you need to get a crit off of the initial shit damage that fire provides in order to get more burning damage. And there is a lot of these. Critting with X skill will increase your burning damage to enemies, and you can get more burning damage. This is shit. I'm gonna tell you that right now. Burning damage is shit from what I've played it. It's nice as a passive damage option in lower things. Like, I'll skip ahead and show you what my build is real quick, okay? My build is lightning, lightning, okay? Lightning, lightning. See all these lightning? But what I'm doing is I have this weird fire engine where I have Hydra, I have the enchantment, which I'll get to in a minute, which is direct damage from skills applies burning damage. And then I have this ring where lucky hit, any burning damage has a chance to restore 10 mana. I'm throwing this little fire engine in, if you will, where it's a ring, an enchantment, and a skill into my lightning build in order to be able to regen my mana, because mana regen is such a large problem. But the fact that I feel the need to lose 50% of my enchantments, 50% of my valuable ring slots, and 15% of my skill bar just for mana recovery is a bit annoying. I'm ignoring ice. We're going to come back to ice in a minute. Let's vent for a minute about fire and lightning, okay? Which, by the way, while we're on the subject of Frostbolt, the best thing that Frostbolt has going for it is that random vulnerable against frozen enemies, which the rest of the kit does. Mana generation off of chilled and frozen, which again, in theory is good. Now, everything you do applies chill or frozen, so this is good. But the amount of mana you're getting back isn't enough to really help you. Because again, 4 mana per chilled enemy. In order to get a free cast of Ice Shard, I have to hit an enemy 8 times. That's not very good for mana recovery. Whereas, if I'm, say, a Barbarian, all I need are 2 or 3 swings of Frenzy. And I have enough mana for my basics, for my core skill. Double that if you run the skill where you get double. If I'm Necromancer and I'm throwing out Bone Splinters, I need 2 Bone Splinters for 1 Bone Spear. Like, those classes inherently have better regeneration. And this is a class that is supposed to have ridiculous amounts of regeneration in their kit. Okay? Now let's talk about fire and lightning skills real quick. Okay? Incinerate is quite possibly one of the worst skills in the game. It's stupid. You lock yourself in place. You're supposed to deal a flamethrower beam in front of you. And let's be clear, the damage is not strong enough to see play. The best thing you can do is the old Flame Nendo strategy that we used to do in Paladins when you were Fernando, where you just spin around in a circle swinging your flame beam around. Yay. This needs at least 3 legendary aspects to be viable. Fireball is decent direct damage. And you can get a few bonus things in here that help buff your damage. But this is your best damage skill out of your fire options that are available. And the main reason why you would run this over Meteor or Firewall, which I'll get to in a minute, is because it's a much lower mana cost at 30 as opposed to these. Alright, so let's jump down. You have Meteor. Meteor's mana cost is 36. It's still more than Fireball. It takes time for the damn thing to hit in the first place, which means it can miss. And again, it has this weird shit in there about it wants to crit. All these fire skills want crit for bonus burning damage. This skill takes too long to be effective. You have to run legendary aspects to get it to fall faster, to get more meteorites to fall with it. You have Firewall, okay? Firewall lays out this little line on the ground that does great damage over time, but the enemies have to stay in it. Meaning you're going to be in a situation where you're just laying down like 2 or 3 firewalls, running away and hoping they chase you. God forbid you're fighting a world boss that likes to run around and doesn't really, like, pay attention to you specifically, this skill is trash. But the damage over time on this is at least good. The burning effect off of Firewall is at least good. A lot of people run Firewall builds exclusively for in fire because it is good burning damage compared to the other burning skills. The problem, once again, comes from the fact that burning damage is too over-reliant on its skills. Inferno is probably the only of the ultimate abilities that's a quote-unquote generic ultimate. So if you're running a battle mage or you want to run a little bit of everything, you'll run Inferno just because it's basically neutral. Because Unstable Currents forces you to run lightning skills, and a lot of them. Deep Freeze forces you to run ice skills, and a lot of them. Inferno doesn't really need anything. It pulls enemies into the center of it for 8 seconds while it's active. Any of your fire skills don't cost mana, which is great, which helps this whole fire has a lot of mana going for it. But the problem with fire having a lot of mana is that you're casting your skills so often because they deal burning damage. And then if you look at your key passives, this one is again crit damage around fire, which doesn't crit. The burning over time doesn't crit. It can't crit. So it's the initial damage, which sucks. And then you have this one, where your burning damage is increased based off of the amount of unique sources of burn. Now, this is very good in pure fire because of the fact that you can get a lot of fire damage. Because you have the enchantment, you have Inferno, you have Firewall, you have Meteor, you have Hydra, you have one of these fire skills, you have Firebolt, right? So if you're looking at that, you have Firebolt, you have Hydra, insert fire skill, Flame Shield, insert mastery skill, Inferno, plus your enchantment. You have 7 ways that you can get 7 different ways of getting bonus burn. So combustion's not bad in a burning build, but you're heavily building into damage over time for that. Now look at lightning. This sorceress is a lightning sorceress, and I tried to get it to work, and I just haven't gotten it to work until I threw this fire engine in order to get extra mana recovery. Okay? If I want to run, there's 2 main builds you can do. The close range build is Arc Lash, which has guaranteed stun, very close range. Charge Bolt, which is a random ability. It deals more damage, and there's a stun in there, but it's random, so you have to be really close if you want all 5 bolts to hit. Lightning Spear is kind of a throw-in. I'll get to that in a minute when I explain the other build. And Ball Lightning, which is moves across very slowly, doesn't deal a lot of damage, but... where is it? Here we go. After hitting close enemies 50 times, your next cast will stun enemies for 1 second. So this is kind of your, I like to stun, I like to be up close type build, right? The problem is the mana cost on Ball Lightning is fucking ridiculous, which means I can't run it outside of this dedicated build where it's pretty much the only mana skill I'm casting. The long range build, which is what I run, is Spark, because it bounces. Chain Lightning, because it bounces. Lightning Spear, because it bounces. Lightning Spear, by the way, is not here for the damage at all. You see I have rank 10 Lightning Spear, and I do 28% damage per hit, which is just fucking terrible for the investment of points that I have into this. The reason why it's good, though, is because it has a stacking, increasing crit chance and critting stuns. And I'm not even running a mastery. Now, if you're wondering why would I run Lightning Spear if it's low damage? Well, the main reason is it's a cooldown. This is the second issue that you have with this category. See, if you look at Druid has a secondary category of damage skills. Their wrath skills, like Rabies and Boulder. They're on a cooldown. They're not draining your spirit. Meaning, if you're out of spirit, you can cast one of those bad boys to get damage. Barbarian has something similar. They're called weapon masteries now. Granted, Death Blow is really the only reliable skill you can use as an alternative damage option. Steel Grasp is basically just a gimmick, and Rupture kind of sucks. But, it is what it is. Necromancer has Bone Spirit. Okay? A cooldown alternative to a damage skill. Yeah, you don't really get that. All of your mastery skills cost mana instead of having a cooldown, which actively hurts you. Lightning Spear gets chucked in just so that you have an extra damage skill that doesn't require mana, since you're always fucking out of mana outside of 2 builds that never run out of mana, pretty much. Which I'll get to in a minute. Also, for your Conjuration skills, Hydra's just a generic good skill. You chuck it out. It's a relatively low mana cost. You chuck it out. It sits out there for 10 seconds. It deals passive damage. It gives you burning damage off of that. It's decent for passive damage. If you don't have anything else to run and you don't want to run a second defensive skill, you kind of just slot in Hydra and you're good to go. Lightning Spear is good for random stun, random crit. But other than that, the damage is pretty bad. You're mainly running it because it's low cooldown. Ice Blades just kind of suck. Like, yes, they can do vulnerable. Yes, they can slash enemies. It kind of works like a lower cooldown, higher damage version of Lightning Spear. But you're trading the crit stun for vulnerable instead, which isn't worth it. I find this skill to be really shit from most of my testing with it. And the aspects for it just aren't worth it. So there's your Conjuration skills summed up. Chain Lightning's only really good, by the way, because of the fact that it bounces. You can get bonus crits off of it. You can get a lot of bouncing damage. There's some good aspects for it. Right? And if you look, Ball Lightning kind of sucks. The reason why, on a Lightning build, you need to have all these damage options is for your ultimate. Basically, whenever you cast a non-basic shock skill, so that would either be Charge Bolts, Lightning Spear, Chain Lightning, or Ball Lightning, one of those, you get a free cast alongside it. So your strategy is you pop Unstable Currents, you pop Lightning Spear, and you immediately start spamming whatever your mana option is for your Lightning skill. Again, this is Charge Bolts or Lightning Spear, because if you use Ball Lightning, you'll get to throw out 2 before you're out of mana. If you use Lightning Spear, or Chain Lightning, or Charge Bolt, you get to throw out, say it with me, 3. Ooh. Ah. But this gives you a lot of area of effect damage with all these little lightning effects bouncing around the screen. There's a lot going on with it. It's good bonus damage. This is a good ultimate, but it only works in Lightning. If you're only running one Lightning skill, this ability sucks. You wouldn't run this. So you can't run this in Battle Mage. You can't throw this into hybrid sort of builds. It's pure Lightning or bust. Then you look at your passive. You have Crackling Energy. I don't like the Crackling Energy build. It's very, very annoying. Because you're running around picking up Crackling Energy, and you get some effects based off of it. I find it inconsistent. I'm not a fan of it. I've seen builds that do great with it. I just don't like that style of play. So you end up having to run this one by default, where close enemies take increased damage from your shock skills, and they deal less damage to you. And then anytime you crit, which is oh so often, you increase these bonuses by 25%. Increasing that bonus by 25% does not mean that close enemies take 35% increased damage and deal 45% less damage to you. Let's start with that. What that means is that you're increasing those bonuses by 25%. So the 10% goes to 12.5%. The 20% goes to 25%. But you run this if you're not a Crackling Energy build, because what the fuck else are you gonna run? Like, I was so tempted to run it when I changed my build over to this. I was tempted to run a fire build. But why would I do that? This at least gives me some passive damage reduction to keep me alive longer. Because Sorceress has next to no damage reduction outside of your 1 damage immune skill. It's not really 1, you have 2. But I don't really consider Teleport a damage immune skill because it works so quickly. You have 1 damage immune skill. Now, why I've been avoiding talking about ice. You see, when I was explaining fire, or when I was explaining lightning, you can tell I'm kind of angry. I was explaining them coming from a place of anger. Because I'm genuinely fighting to put things in my build that are not a second or third defensive skill. Because let's be clear, if I was not running the little fire engine that I'm running for mana recovery, ice armor is here. I have ran all 3 of these defensive skills before I said I do not want to keep running 2 defensive skills on this character. Okay? I don't want to run teleport. I didn't like it. I didn't really want to run Frost Nova for the freeze, because the freeze wasn't great. I didn't have a great synergy with it. Basically, it's just an extra form of crowd control. Ice armor was great for the mana regen and for some barrier bonuses, but I didn't have the legendary slots available to me for anything ice armor related, which is why I ultimately dropped it. If I'm playing a fire sorceress, I have the exact same thing. I might run Fireball, I might run Hydra, I might run one of these, plus my basic, plus Flame Shield, and I can do without Inferno, if I'm being completely honest. I can do without Inferno, and I can do without Hydra. So if I wanted to drop one of those 2, I could run an extra defensive skill. Or, let's say I don't run Fireball. Let's say I just run, say, Meteor, or Firewall. I wouldn't even run Fireball. I could run an extra defensive skill, okay? You're actively fighting for slots, because you don't really give a fuck. Then you get Ice. Now, you need to have your basic in there, just as a fallback option, because you will run out of mana. There's a superior Ice build and an inferior Ice build. So the inferior Ice build is running Frost Orb, which is okay damage. You can get bonus damage if it's higher than 50 mana, which is pretty easy to accomplish. You can get either vulnerable or mana regen back. Okay, so you're running that, and you're running the... you definitely have to run Frost Nova in this version of the build. You have to have an extra way to freeze. You have to run Blizzard. You have to run Deep Freeze. And then you're running Shatter, where anytime a frozen enemy unfreezes, they explode and deal 25% of the damage you dealt to them while they were frozen. This is the lesser of the builds, of the 2 ice builds, and it's better than the 3 fire builds and the 2 lightning builds. Think about that. Both ice builds rank on top of the other builds in the class. Now, it's lower damage output because it's heavily based around Shatter. It's heavily based around freezing enemies, them unfreezing, and the AoE damage doing the work for you. The most reliable build is the Ice Shard build, where Ice Shard pierces and ricochets off of frozen enemies. Because you can get a shit ton of pierces, you can cast 1 Ice Shard and get tons of value out of it. You want to pair that with Blizzard, because Blizzard continuously chills per second. And you want to combo that with Avalanche, where Lucky Hit Frost skills have a chance for your next cast to consume no mana and deal bonus damage. And there's a legendary aspect where you get the second proc of that. Because you can play like this. Frostbolt, Frostbolt, Frostbolt. Oh, my Lucky Hit procced. Blizzard, Blizzard for free, and then start spamming Ice Shards now that everything's frozen. Oh, my Lucky Hit procced again? Blizzard, Blizzard, start spamming Ice Shards. Because Blizzard costs the most out of the skills, you can effectively get free Blizzards by Avalanche. That's not even talking about its ultimate, which is complete damage immunity, complete crowd control immunity for 4 seconds. You do have to stand still. Big damage over time. And when it expires, you get a barrier based off of every enemy that you freeze. And if you want to move around again, like if you're in a world boss, you just press the button again and it ends it. So you have another option for continuous freezing, continuous chilling. And everything in Ice Sorceress does crowd control. It's chilling or freezing. Everything. Meaning, even if you're running something like Ice Shards, which is a direct damage type skill, okay? You might say, well, Ice Shards isn't good because it doesn't apply chill and things like that. Well, it applies vulnerable. And you get extra chill damage from your other skills. Like, this is the thing you're looking for. An ice build, this is what you're running. You're running Frostbolt, you're running one of your core skills, okay, that's 1, 2. You're running Flame Shield, you're running Ice Armor, okay? You're running Blizzard. That's 5 right there. You're running Deep Freeze. That's 6. If you got a 7th skill, you'd be running Frost Nova. If you got an 8th skill, you're running Teleport. If you got a 9th skill, you're running your other Frozen skill. You have to get 10 skills in to get another option that's not a defensive skill or an ice skill. Because at that point, I'd probably throw in Hydra for some passive damage. Maybe Lightning Spear, because it's a cooldown. It's not a mana cost, right? Whereas, if you're looking at fire, right? Okay, let's say you're running fire. So you run Frostbolt, you're running Fireball, Flame Shield, Hydra, Mastery, Inferno, right? If I got an extra skill, defense, extra skill, defense. At that point, probably I would again Lightning Spear because it's a cooldown instead. Lightning build. I already explained. I'm not even running all lightning. That synergy is a problem. Now another issue that you have is the enchantment system. All right, so you have these enchantments right here at the bottom. It won't let me fucking. Hold on. There we go. You have these enchantments right here. Similarly to what I said with Druid and Spirit Boons. These enchantments do not level with you at all, or as you level the skill. You also get 2 of them. Now, let's talk about these enchantments real quick. Because these enchantments, you get 2 of them. So you're thinking, great, I can diversify my build. Well, no, you can't. Because you're really running one of the 2 fire aspects is in every build. Like, if you're running this fire build like I'm doing, you want this because any skill you use, including a basic skill, gives you bonus burning damage for free. So you can get burning damage off of literally any skill in the game, which is very good, and that's what lets you proc that ring effect so consistently. So, because of that, this is thrown into almost every build. Most Sorceress builds are running this enchantment. Just because of how good that is. And if you're not, you have the instant get out of jail free card with the Flame Shield enchantment, where anytime you would take fatal damage, Flame Shield automatically activates. If it's on cooldown, doesn't matter, automatically activates. This effect has a 2-minute cooldown, but remember that you heal 50% of your missing health, which means that every 2 minutes that you would die, you instead go to 50% of your maximum life. That one feature makes this a must slot in every build. Especially if you're a hardcore Sorceress. I don't know how people play hardcore Sorceress without this skill in there, but... Boo! I've been AFK for 30 minutes. Like, the enchantment system isn't that great. I'm gonna try and get back in. Otherwise, I'll release a separate video on the enchantments. I'll just cut it off here. Let me see if I can get it. But, if you're thinking you can run enchantments as extra passives to try and work around what the game wants you to do, right? If the game wants you to play in a certain style of play, you can go, well, I can get some diversity from my build. Not really. If you're an Ice Sorceress, for example, you're going to run the Flame Shield one. You might run the Fire one if you're running that ring, if you can afford that ring. Right, here we go. You're running mostly Ice enchantments. So, like, look at your skills. Killing an enemy has a 20% chance to form Crackling Energy. If you're not Crackling Energy build, you're never running this. Direct damage from skills applies 15% chill. This can give you freezing capabilities in any build like the Firebolt one can. Here's the thing. All of your skills are chilling as a Sorceress. This is redundant. You don't need this on Ice Sorceress. Then you have Arc Lash. Whenever you use a cooldown, enemies around you are stunned for a half a second. Now that's pretty good, just giving you the stun. Here's the problem. It's a half-second stun. And, isn't that narcissism? How is that narcissist? I mean, it's a half a second stun, and where they say when you use a cooldown, enemies around you, they mean close enemies. Okay? Any enemy that you couldn't normally stun with Arc Lash won't be stunned by this. So it's not like, oh, all the enemies on the screen get stunned. No, it's just melee range enemies. This is good because you can proc it off of any cooldown. Here's the problem. Outside of your conjurations and your defensive skills, you don't have fucking cooldowns. Everything is mana-based. So this can go right in the trash. So, we have one skill that's good out of this for the enchantments, which we already explained. Let's go to your core skills. Incinerate. Every 14 seconds, a serpent spawns and incinerates enemies for 9 seconds, or 8 seconds. Basically, this summons the shitty little, you know the little stun enemies that spawn in Hazard, the little snake fuckers? Make you want to commit non-living if you don't have Unstoppable active? Those guys? Yeah, every 14 seconds one of those guys pops up. Great! Do they stun enemies? No, they just breathe fire. Yay. I hate that skill. If they gave me the stun, I'd like that. Whenever you kill an enemy, they explode in a fireball, dealing 50% of its damage. Okay. Fun fact. I've tested this. It only works with fireball. Chuck that right out the window. Whenever you cast a non-basic skill, you have a 30% chance to launch a frozen orb. Now, this is good. This is very good. This is free damage right here. But, again, this is competing with a couple of better ones. Okay? But we'll keep this. This is the second good enchantment we've come across. Okay, good job. Ice Shard. Ice Shards automatically conjure and fly towards frozen enemies. Basically, you get free Ice Shards every time enemies are frozen. Okay? Great skill, but it requires you to have Ice Shards on your skill bar. You can't just run this as an enchantment. So again, hybrid builds, no value. Chuck it out the window. Chain Lightning. Chain Lightning forms automatically after spending 100 mana. That's great. That's good. It's free lightning damage. Here's the problem. 100 mana is like 3 casts of your skill. That's a full mana bar. And then you have to regenerate that mana bar before you can get it again. So it's okay. Charge Bolts. Whenever you stun an enemy, 40% chance to release Charge Bolts from them. Yeah, that sucks, because the Charge Bolts, again, have a random damage pattern. At any time you stun an enemy, it's not a guaranteed, it's a chance when you stun an enemy. That just is terrible. You wouldn't want to run that. So right now we're at 2.5 good skills. Okay. Flame Shield we've already covered, so that's 3 now, or 3.5. Teleport. This is an active nerf to your evade. You don't want to run this. Ice Armor. Upon getting hit, you have a 5% chance to apply Ice Armor. This is actually pretty good. Now, it's the basic bitch version of Ice Armor. It's not going to have these enchantments on it. It's just basic bitch version. But if you want some extra defense, this is actually okay. Here's the problem. You can just equip Ice Armor and be fine. Why would you run this? Especially if you only get 2 enchantment spots. And this is fighting with Flame Shield and Firebolt, which are arguably the 2 best. Okay, so let's say that those aren't the 2 best. Let's say you're just trying to find 2 others. So again, that's fighting for the Frozen Orb one and the Chain Lightning one for free bonus damage. Frost Nova. Conjuration skills. Chuck it out the window. You're not running this enchantment slot just because, even if you're full conjuration build, you're not running this. Lucky hit chant off of conjuration skills. Chuck it out the window. It's terrible. Alright, so then you got Hydra. Okay? After you spend 200 mana. So I'd have to spend 2 full fucking mana bars to get a 5-headed Hydra that spawns for half as long as normal. Chuck it out the window. Ice Blades. Every 40 seconds that you spend in cooldowns, you spawn Ice Blades on a random enemy. This is better than Ice Blades itself, by the way, because you can spend a decent amount of time in cooldowns between your ultimate and your defensive skills. So if you run an ultimate, or if you run multiple defensive skills, this is not bad. Again, though, this is directly competing with Firebolt, Flame Shield, Frozen Orb, and Chain Lightning. So we can chuck this into the list, but it's just directly competing with them. Lightning Spear. Upon absorbing crackling energy, chuck it out the window. The Blizzard one I really like. Every 15 seconds, a blizzard will form and follow you around for 6 seconds. Now, this blizzard, again, doesn't get the bonus effects that are in the back here. However, it does proc the legendary aspect where while you are in your blizzard, you take 25% less damage. So as a defense, it kind of changes blizzard into a little bit of a defensive skill. I normally run this in my Ice Sorceress. If you can afford to fit this on your enchantment and that legendary aspect, usually on a headpiece, this can be a better way to improve your defense. But remember that you're only going to be getting that damage reduction every 15 seconds. So think of it like an uncontrollable cooldown. You have the Fireball one. Lucky hit chance up to an 8% chance. So it's lucky hit with a low percentage. Yeah, chuck that out the window. That's garbage tier. Firewall. Lucky hit up to a 25% chance. 25% chance that when dealing burning damage to spawn 2 firewalls. Now this is actually surprisingly good. Here's the problem with this. You have to run the Firebolt enchantment and the mana ring in order to do this. So you'd be losing both of your fire slots, both of your enchantment slots to burning damage and lucky hit chances. And the Firewolf, okay, don't benefit from any of these effects. Just the basic stat line. So it's okay. It's decent, right? But again, fighting with all the other aspects that we talked about in the beginning. Then you have the Ball Lightning one. I personally like this one. If you're lightning and you crit a lot, this is very good. This is what I was originally running before the Fire Engine, which is critical strikes have a 25% chance to spawn a static Ball Lightning, which itself can stun and crit. So you can get a crit off of a static Ball Lightning that procs the lucky hit, that procs the crit to spawn another one, which is retarded when I've seen that happen. However, that's competing with all the other spots we talked about. You get 2 enchantments, and you legitimately have 2 that dominate the rest. 4 or 5 that are fighting for 1, maybe 2 spots, and you have at least 5 that are just redundantly stupid. So, at the end of the day, Sorceress is getting some much needed buffs because it's just not strong enough to compete. If you look at Necromancer, which has less defensive options, is better offensively because it has more overall utility. It has more build diversity. There's more things going on. Barbarian, Druid, Rogue, same thing. They have more build diversity and more things going on. They have more options at their disposal. Another thing I'm gonna throw at you just to talk about this. All right, I'm gonna ignore the glyph sockets. Let's ignore the glyph sockets. I don't really care about the glyph sockets too much because those you can kind of improve those by leveling them to where it doesn't really matter. You see where I have my build set at for this is pretty good. So a lot of the power that they nerfed from Sorceress, you can build back from this. I specifically want to talk about the board gates and the legendary nodes that are available to you. I specifically want to talk about. This is one of the lightning ones, which is stunning close enemies gives you 10 mana. That's pretty good. Here's the problem with this. If you're not lightning, you don't get this. And that 10 mana means you need to stun 3 enemies to get a free core skill cast. Meaning, you are building heavy into close range stun. This, in my opinion, specifically works with Arc Lash. I'm making it work in this build. Look at your other legendary nodes, okay? Where's the other lightning one? Crackling Energy. I don't want Crackling Energy. Therefore, throw it in the garbage. I wouldn't run this. At least not for the legendary node. Look at the fire ones. Casting Fireball or Meteor increases the critical strike chance of further cast of that skill by 5% for 5 seconds. Additional stacks do not refresh this timer. That last line right there makes this skill worthless, because if I can get my mana up to where I can fucking spam Fireball and Meteor, you should let me have those stacks, goddammit, because I don't get any fucking mana. There's not enough mana to go around on this character. You better let me get those bonus stacks. Doesn't do it, throw it in the trash. The burning one's okay. Burning damage is increased by 40% of critical strike damage, increased 5% for every 20 intelligence. This right here is going to be my second legendary node in this build, because I'm running the hybrid build that has the fire and the lightning that synergizes pretty well. I'm planning on running this, because that's going to give you a lot of burning damage. Here's the problem. If you're planning on running burning damage, this is necessary. You have to run this as close as humanly possible to get this bonus. This is your first priority on Fire Sorceress to get, just because of how necessary it is to increase the burning damage. Okay? If you're not running it, there's no point. Ice, cold damage to vulnerable enemies increases your lucky hit chance. That's kind of mediocre. Ice doesn't do well with lucky hit chance. Fire and lightning do more. So that's kind of trash. Killing a frozen enemy grants you 15% of your maximum life as a barrier. Very easy. If you're Shatter Ice, this is your first one that you're going for. If you're Avalanche Ice, you don't necessarily want to go for this one right away, but you definitely want this one, because you're getting a lot of freeze in there as well. Then you have your mix builds, your Battle Mage builds. Elemental Summoner. Conjuration skills have 5% reduced cooldown or mana cost per conjuration you have equipped. So you might say, okay, that's a nice buff. Here's the problem. Even if you're building into it, if you have all 3 conjuration skills on your bar, first off, kill yourself. Secondly, here's what you get out of that. You get 15% reduced cooldown and mana cost on the lowest cooldown, lowest mana cost parts of your build. This legendary node, with all 3 equipped, is shaving off at most 2 or 3 seconds off your cooldown and maybe 4 or 5 mana off your cast. It is nowhere near impactful enough. You could triple this effect and it still wouldn't see play. If this was 15% per skill, meaning 3 equipped would be a 45% reduction in cooldown or mana, you might see conjuration builds. They are the worst build you could do. And then this one right here, which is Enchantment Master. Your enchantments are 20% stronger. Okay. But you only have 2 enchantments. And what's the best you can do off of that? Like, your enchantments are 20% stronger. How does that work if you look at, like, some of the enchantments that you have? Like, I'm assuming that means that instead of after spending 200 mana, it'd be, say, 160 mana. You get it, right? Or say, on the Flame Shield one, instead of the cooldown being 120 seconds, say the cooldown was, you know, like, I don't think it's 100. It'd be 190. I think it's 100. 100 seconds, right? Like, is that's what you're running your legendary node for? So overall, the Sorceress buffs that are upcoming are definitely very warranted. And hopefully we'll have an update video when they launch.